Okay, so are you ready to dive deep into some lunar mysteries? We've got a whole stack of sources here, YouTube videos, some Wikipedia rabbit holes, research papers, even some historical accounts. And they all kind of converge on this one central question. What secrets does the moon hold?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to unpack. The moon has always captured our imaginations from its formation to its potential role in, human exploration and everything in between.
Exactly. And we're going to look at some truly bizarre stuff today. Like, did you know that some folks actually think the moon is hollow? Maybe even like a giant alien spaceship. We're going to explore that theory a bit later, look at the science for and against it. But first, I think it makes sense to talk about how the moon came to be in the first place.
Right. So the prevailing scientific theory for the moon's formation is what's called the giant impact hypothesis. Basically, this proposes that very early on in Earth's history, a Mars-sized object slammed right into our planet.
Whoa.
Yeah, and the debris from this colossal impact, that eventually coalesced to form the moon.
Whoa. That is just mind-blowing to imagine. A Mars-sized object just hitting the Earth. I mean, what evidence do we have to support that theory?
Well, there are several key pieces of evidence that point to the giant impact theory. One of the most compelling is the actual composition of lunar rocks that were brought back by the Apollo missions. They show remarkable similarities to Earth's mantle, which suggests a common origin.
So they're like, kind of like Earth siblings
Oh,
almost.
exactly, yeah. Another piece of evidence is that the moon has a relatively small iron core compared to the Earth. And this would make sense if the moon formed primarily from the Earth's outer layers, which are less rich in iron.
So basically the collision like kind of stripped away some of the Earth's outer stuff, and then that formed into the moon.
That's the idea. And on top of all that, computer simulations of such an impact, they actually match the observed dynamics of the Earth-Moon system pretty darn well.
Wow, that's pretty convincing. Okay, so science has a pretty good explanation for the moon's origin story. But now let's dive into some of the, shall we say, weirder aspects of the moon, the stuff that has fueled those hollow moon theories. One that always comes up is the moon's density. It's much lower than Earth's, and this has led some people to speculate about vast empty spaces inside.
Right. But that difference in density can be explained pretty simply by the moon's composition. Remember, it likely formed from Earth's outer layers, which are less dense than the planet's iron-rich core. Plus, the moon's interior has, over billions of years, cooled and solidified, and that contributes to its lower density as well.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the whole moon ringing like a bell thing? After the Apollo 12 mission intentionally crashed its lunar module onto the moon, seismic instruments detected vibrations that lasted for over an hour. I mean, doesn't that kind of sound, well, hollow?
It's definitely a fascinating observation. But not necessarily proof of hollowness. See, the moon's surface, it's dry, it's porous, and it's fractured. This means that seismic waves transmit differently than they do through the Earth's more solid and, well, hydrated crust. So these differences in composition and structure, that's what could explain those prolonged vibrations.
So the moon's just kind of built differently, and that changes how it responds to things like impacts.
Exactly.
That's pretty amazing. All right, another thing that hollow moon fans like to point to is the shallow depth of lunar craters. You'd think that these massive impacts from asteroids would gouge out like way deeper depressions, right? Some people say this means there's like a hard, impenetrable shell beneath the surface. What do you think?
Well, it's true that some lunar craters are surprisingly shallow, but science has an explanation for that too. Over billions of years, dust and debris from all those micrometeoroid impacts, they've gradually accumulated on the surface. And this fine material, we call it regolith, it's slowly filled in the bottom of craters, so they just appear shallower than they initially were. So it's like a constant, slow motion infilling process happening on the moon.
Exactly.
Wow, that really makes you think about how much the lunar landscape has changed over time. Okay, now this one's a little bit different. Have you ever noticed how, perfectly round the moon's orbit around Earth seems?
Yeah, it is pretty striking, isn't it?
Right. Some folks find that a little suspicious, like maybe it's been deliberately placed in that, you know, too perfect orbit.
It is true that the moon's orbit is nearly circular, but it's not perfectly so, and it's constantly changing, although super slowly. This is all due to the, well, complex gravitational dance between the Earth, the Sun, and even other planets. So the current shape of the moon's orbit is just a product of billions of years of celestial mechanics, really. Okay, so it's a natural thing, even if it seems a bit, I don't know, too perfect for nature at first glance. So we've tackled some of the let's call them quirks of the moon, its density, the ringing bell effect, the almost too circular orbit, and we've seen that science actually has some pretty solid explanations for all of them. But now, are you ready to delve into the theory that really captures the imagination, the spaceship moon?
Let's do it. The spaceship moon theory, well, as out there as it sounds, it's definitely got a certain allure to it. Basically, it proposes that the moon isn't a natural satellite at all, but actually a massive, hollowed out spacecraft, maybe brought here by a super advanced alien civilization.
Like straight out of a sci-fi movie, just a giant, ancient spaceship parked in Earth's orbit.
Yeah.
And people who support this theory, they often point to those same lunar quirks we just talked about, the density, the ringing, as evidence for their idea. They say these characteristics are way more consistent with a hollow artificial structure than a natural body.
It is fun to think about, but it's important to remember that the spaceship moon theory, well, it doesn't really have any, I would say, credible scientific backing. We already talked about how the moon's density and seismic behavior can be explained through natural processes, right?
Right, and there's, as far as I know, zero evidence of any artificial structures or technology on the moon. Despite decades of lunar exploration, missions that landed on the surface, rovers driving around, nothing even remotely suggesting alien construction has ever been found.
Exactly. And the giant impact hypothesis, with all its supporting evidence, it remains the most plausible explanation for the moon's origin. But hey, maybe we can shift gears a bit now, talk about something that is undeniably real, the moon's influence on Earth.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right.
I mean, we all know about tides, right? The rise and fall of the ocean levels, that's caused by the moon's gravitational pull. But its influence goes way beyond that, right?
Oh, absolutely. The moon plays a crucial role in stabilizing the Earth's axial tilt, which is the angle at which the planet rotates on its axis. And this stability, it's essential for maintaining our relatively stable and hospitable climate.
So without the moon, we could be dealing with some really crazy weather.
Imagine, like, ice ages suddenly giving way to scorching heat and then back again, all within, relatively short periods. Life on Earth would have a very hard time adapting to those kinds of chaotic conditions.
Wow, I never really thought about that before. So the moon is like a giant stabilizer keeping our planet, running smoothly. It's amazing to think this seemingly silent, faraway orb is so vital to our existence. But even with all we know, the moon still has plenty of mysteries, things that continue to, intrigue and puzzle scientists and space enthusiasts alike. Like, for example, those strange lights and mists people have reported seeing on the moon for centuries, what they call lunar transient phenomena, or LTPs.
Right. So LTPs, they are a collection of these like short-lived changes in the appearance of the lunar surface. We're talking flashes of light, changes in brightness or color, even like hazy clouds or mists appearing.
Exactly. And I've read accounts of like glowing mists in the Plato crater, these unexplained flashes of blue lights in the Aristarchus crater. There are even these strange tracks left by boulders that seem to defy gravity.
Yeah.
And get this, back in 1971, a cloud of water vapor suddenly appeared on the moon, covering 100 square miles. It hung around for 14 hours and then vanished. So what's the deal with these LTPs? What's causing them?
Well, there are actually several scientific hypotheses about what might be causing these LTPs. Some are, let's say, more plausible than others. One possibility is what's called outgassing, where gases trapped beneath the lunar surface escape and create this temporary, very thin atmosphere that can scatter sunlight.
So it's kind of like the moon is, burping out gas and we see those visual effects.
Yeah. In a way, yeah. Another possibility is impacts from meteoroids or maybe small asteroids. Those can kick up dust and create visible flashes.
What about volcanoes? I mean, could those be causing some of these LTPs?
We can't completely rule out the possibility of active volcanoes on the moon, but it's still a topic of debate within the scientific community. And it's worth noting that most of the moon's volcanic activity, well, it's believed to have ceased billions of years ago.
So we don't have all the answers yet when it comes to LTPs, but that's part of what makes the moon so fascinating. It's a place where we're still, making discoveries, piecing together its history, and all the activity going on up there.
Yeah.
It seems the moon is a lot more active than we initially thought.
It definitely is a dynamic place. It's constantly changing, even if those changes are happening on timescales that are, well, hard for us to grasp. And speaking of change, have you heard about the moons? It's a slow but steady drift away from Earth.
Wait, what? The moon is, moving away from us. Hold on, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's because of these, complicated gravitational interactions between the Earth and the moon. It's slowly receding at a rate of 1 to 2 inches per year.
Whoa, okay, that's wild. But what does that mean for the future? What will happen to Earth? when the moon is gone, will we even be able to survive without it?
Well, don't worry too much. This drifting is happening incredibly slowly. It'll take billions of years for the moon to, fully escape Earth's gravitational pull. But the long-term consequences, they could be pretty significant.
Like, what kind of consequences? What would an Earth without a moon even look like?
Well, without the moon there to stabilize things, the Earth's axial tilt would become much more erratic. And that would lead to, extreme climate shifts. The length of our days would probably change too, at least initially getting shorter as Earth's rotation speeds up without the moon's gravitational drag. But over, super long timescales, other gravitational influences would come into play, like the sun's gravity. It's hard to say exactly what would happen to Earth's rotation in the very, very long term.
So basically, the moon is like our planet's cosmic babysitter, keeping everything running smoothly.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it really underscores just how vital the moon is to life as we know it.
And we just take it for granted most of the time, right? Well, after this deep dive, I'm definitely going to be looking at the moon with a whole new appreciation.
As you should. It truly is a celestial wonder that deserves our, I would say, attention and respect.
And maybe a little healthy dose of awe and mystery, too, right? It seems like every answer we find about the moon just leads to more questions.
And that's the beauty of scientific exploration, right? It's a never-ending journey of discovery. Speaking of discoveries, should we move on to some of the more speculative ideas about the moon? We talked about it being hollow or even an alien spaceship, but what about those claims of artificial structures on the surface?
Oh, yeah, there are some wild theories out there. People claim to see towers, pyramids, all sorts of, like, symmetrical structures in photos taken by astronomers' probes, even the astronauts themselves.
Mhm.
Do any of these claims actually hold up?
Hmm. Well, to be honest, a lot of these claims, they come from, I would say, misinterpretations of shadows and light play in low-resolution images. There's also this phenomenon called pareidolia, which is that tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random or vague stimuli.
I feel like seeing a bunny rabbit in a cloud.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to find patterns even when they're not really there. So when it comes to the moon, this can lead us to see, artificial structures where there are really only natural formations.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those claims that we, haven't gone back to the moon because we found something there, something they're not telling us about?
Right. I've heard those too. People often point to the sudden cancellation of the Apollo missions, saying it was a cover-up of some extraordinary discovery. There's a lot of talk about Apollo 18, 19, and 20, missions that never officially happened. Some say they did happen, but were classified because of what they found on the moon. Intriguing stories, definitely, but they lack any, credible evidence to back them up. The real reason those later Apollo missions were canceled was mostly due to budgetary constraints and, let's be honest, shifting political priorities.
Makes sense. Okay, so maybe no secret missions or hidden alien bases.
Hmm.
But there are still those who claim to have, like, firsthand knowledge of these hidden structures on the moon.
Right.
Right. Like there's Sergeant Carl Wolf, who's a former Air Force technician who said he repaired equipment that, transferred images from a lunar satellite. He claimed to have seen images showing a base on the moon.
Right. Sergeant Wolf's story is often cited as, evidence of this government cover-up. However, his claims have been disputed, and there's really no independent verification of those photos he talked about. It's another classic case of he said, they said, lots of, compelling anecdotes, but not a lot of concrete proof.
Yeah. And that's, I think, part of what makes the moon so captivating. It's like this giant blank canvas where we can project all our hopes, fears, and imaginations.
And speaking of projections, there's actually another interesting theory that links the moon to, the idea of souls and reincarnation.
Whoa, hold on. Are we talking like soul traps or something? This is getting deep.
Basically, this theory proposes that the moon isn't just a physical object, but also a kind of spiritual repository, a place where souls are, I don't know, recycled or maybe even imprisoned between lives.
So like a giant cosmic waiting room for souls.
You could say that. Some people who believe this theory point to ancient myths and religious texts that depict the moon as a realm of the dead or a place where souls go after death.
Wow, that's pretty far out there.
Yeah, it is a bit out there, but it really speaks to, I think, that profound human fascination with the mysteries of life and death and what might lie beyond.
It really makes you think about like the true nature of consciousness and whether it's actually bound by the physical limits of our bodies, right? What do you think? Is there something more to us than meets the eye?
Well, I'm a scientist at heart, so I tend to, look for explanations within the realm of the observable and verifiable. But I can't deny that the human mind is capable of some incredible things, feats of imagination and intuition that we can't always fully explain.
So you're not, like, ruling anything out completely.
Never. I think it's important to keep an open mind. That's what fuels scientific discovery, after all.
Okay, I like that. But just for a second, what if there is some truth to these, more esoteric ideas? What if the moon is more than just a rock in space? What if it's like a key to unlocking deeper mysteries about the universe and even about ourselves?
Those are some really thought-provoking questions, questions that, well, philosophers and mystics have pondered for centuries, really.
Maybe the answers are out there just waiting to be discovered. Or maybe, as you said, the beauty is in the mystery itself. But hey, let's not forget about the moon's more down-to-earth influences. I mean, it's got a real impact on us right here, right now.
Absolutely. We already talked about tides and the moon's pull on the oceans, but remember, it also plays a vital role in stabilizing Earth's axial tilt, which is super important for maintaining our planet's, relatively stable and hospitable climate.
Right. You said that without the moon, Earth's wobble would be a lot more pronounced, leading to these, like, extreme and unpredictable climate swings that could, well, make life on Earth as we know it, impossible.
Yeah, it's true. The moon really acts as a kind of gravitational anchor, keeping our planet's spin in check. It's like having a built-in gyroscope that helps to ensure the long-term habitability of our world.
It's amazing, honestly, to think that this, seemingly silent, distant orb plays such a crucial role in our very existence.
It really highlights, again, that interconnectedness of everything in the cosmos, doesn't it?
It does. So let me get this straight. We've got the moon as a climate stabilizer, a source of wonder and myths, a potential gateway to exploring, consciousness and the universe. What else? What else is there?
Well, let's not forget about eclipses. Total solar eclipses, those are where the moon perfectly blocks out the sun. It's this amazing spectacle that has captivated humans, I mean, for millennia, really.
I've only seen videos of total solar eclipses, but they are incredible. The sky goes dark, the temperature drops, and you can see the stars in the middle of the day. It's like something out of a, like, end of the world movie or something.
It's a testament to that remarkable alignment of the Earth, the moon, and the sun. I mean, the moon is just the right size and distance from Earth to create this, perfect visual effect.
It almost seems, too perfect, doesn't it? And some people, they point to this as like evidence that the moon was artificially placed there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a pretty striking coincidence, I'll give you that. But from a scientific perspective, it really just boils down to celestial mechanics. Over billions of years, the moon's orbit has gradually evolved to its current position. And the relative sizes and distances of the Earth, moon, and sun, well, they've just created those conditions for total solar eclipses to
So,
happen.
like grand design, just, physics doing its thing.
Science relies on observable evidence and testable hypotheses. So while we can't definitively rule out, the possibility of some unknown force or intelligence guiding these events, there's just no compelling scientific evidence for that.
That's fair. But, a little mystery keeps things interesting, right?
I completely agree. It's that sense of wonder, I think, that drives us to explore and question and, really seek a deeper understanding. And speaking of seeking understanding, we've only scratched the surface of the moon's mysteries. There's so much more to discover, wouldn't you say?
Like what? What are we still trying to figure out about the moon?
Well, for starters, we still don't know the exact composition of the moon's core. We know it's smaller and less dense than Earth's, but the details are still pretty elusive.
And what about those lunar transient phenomena? Are we any closer to, you know, figuring out what's behind all these strange lights and mists?
There's definitely a lot of research to be done, but, new missions and technologies are providing us with more and more data, more insights. I think we might be on the verge of some really groundbreaking discoveries about the moon's, let's call it, hidden activity.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, there's one more thing I want to touch on.
Mm.
Earlier, you mentioned the moon slowly drifting away from us.
Mhm.
I want to dig a little deeper into that. What's the science behind that drift, and what will it mean for the Earth in the very, very distant future?
Right. So the moon's gradual recession from Earth is due to what are called tidal forces. As the moon orbits Earth, its gravity creates those bulges in the Earth's oceans. And those bulges, well, they exert a slight gravitational tug back on the moon, pulling it a little bit forward in its orbit.
So basically, with each orbit, Earth is giving the moon like a tiny little push.
Precisely. And that little push over time, it causes the moon's orbit to expand very slightly, moving it farther and farther away from Earth.
So does this mean that eventually, like way down the line, the moon could just, escape Earth's gravity completely?
Well, that's theoretically possible, but it's not something we need to worry about anytime soon. It would take, billions of years for that to happen.
Okay, good to know. Plenty of time to enjoy our celestial dance partner then. But even though it's far off, I'm still kind of curious about the long-term effects of this drifting. We talked before about how the moon stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, right? So won't that, like, stabilization weaken as the moon moves farther away?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Over those very long timescales, as the moon recedes, its stabilizing influence on Earth's axial tilt will gradually decrease. And, that could lead to some much more pronounced wobbles in Earth's rotation. And those wobbles could potentially lead to some pretty extreme and unpredictable climate shifts, even more so than what we talked about before.
Whoa. Okay, so the moon is not only our cosmic babysitter, but also a key player in maintaining a stable climate.
That's right. It really underscores how interconnected everything is in our solar system. Everything's in this delicate balance. And even subtle changes can have really far-reaching consequences, especially over vast stretches of time.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. It really makes you appreciate the, delicate balance of our planet and the role that the moon plays in making Earth such a habitable world.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about all these mysteries of the moon and all the scientific, realities of it, and it kind of got me thinking about our future, like humanity's future out there. What's next for us and the moon?
Well, that's the question on a lot of people's minds these days, especially with, the renewed interest in going back to the moon, not just for visits, but for longer term exploration, maybe even, colonization.
Yeah, we're not just talking about like planting a flag anymore.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking moon bases,
Right.
lunar cities. It's pretty wild to think about. But let's get real for a second. Like, what are some of the practical challenges, the things we need to figure out to actually make living on the moon a reality?
Right. Well, the moon presents some, I would say, pretty significant challenges to human habitation. One of the biggest ones is, well, there's no breathable atmosphere. So we would need to, like, create these enclosed environments with, life support systems that could provide oxygen and, regulate air pressure and all that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just like packing up and moving to the moon. We need to create these like mini Earths up there.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of radiation. The moon doesn't have that protective magnetic field like Earth does, so we'd need to shield our habitats from harmful solar and cosmic radiation, which is a huge engineering challenge.
Right, and I imagine the temperatures on the moon are pretty extreme too, right?
Oh, absolutely. During the day, the surface can get scorching hot. I'm talking well over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And then at night, it plummets to, hundreds of degrees below zero. So we'd need some pretty robust temperature regulation systems to keep those habitats livable.
Starting to sound like, living on the moon is more complicated than I initially thought.
It definitely presents its challenges, but
Right.
humans, I would say, are pretty good at, overcoming challenges, right?
Mm.
Especially when there's a big enough payoff.
Right, exactly. So what kind of payoff are we talking about here? What are the potential benefits of actually colonizing the moon?
Well, for starters, the moon would be an amazing place to do scientific research. I'm talking astronomy, geology, you name it. It would offer this pristine environment for observation and experimentation that we just don't have here on Earth.
So we could learn a lot about, the universe and even about ourselves by studying the moon.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for resource extraction. We've touched on this a bit already, but the moon has some valuable resources that could be useful for, supporting lunar settlements, reducing our reliance on Earth's resources, maybe even, fueling future space exploration.
Right, like you mentioned helium-3, rare earth elements, even water ice in those, permanently shadowed craters.
Exactly. Helium-3, for example, it's a rare isotope found on the moon, and it's got potential for use in fusion reactors, which could provide, a clean and practically limitless source of energy.
Whoa, hold on. So the moon could actually hold the key to solving like our energy problems here on Earth.
It's definitely a possibility, although there are still some, big technological hurdles to overcome before fusion power becomes, a practical reality. But the potential is definitely there.
Wow. So mining the moon could actually become like a big business one day.
It's certainly possible, but, and this is important, any discussion of lunar resource extraction needs to include, a serious consideration of the ethical and environmental implications.
Right. I was just thinking that. I mean, we don't want to go up there and just like trash the moon after all this talk about how amazing it is.
Mm.
We need to be smarter about it this time.
That's exactly right. We need to figure out how to, extract these resources sustainably and responsibly without irreparably harming the lunar environment. We have a responsibility, to be stewards of the moon, just like we should be stewards of the Earth.
I like that, space stewardship. It's not just about what we can take from the moon, but like how we can learn from it, appreciate it, and maybe even, I don't know, give back to it in some way.
I love that idea. I hope that future generations will view the moon not just as a source of, resources, but as a partner in our, ongoing journey of exploration and discovery.
I hope so too.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Earlier we talked about those, weird lights and mists people have reported seeing on the moon, those lunar transient phenomena. I have to admit, they still kind of freak me out a little. Have we learned anything new about what might be causing them?
Yeah, there's been some interesting research on that front. It seems like one possible explanation could be the electrostatic charging of lunar dust. Think about it. The moon's surface is constantly bombarded by these charged particles from the sun,
Yeah.
and this can create electric fields that, well, lift those dust particles into the air. And that could explain, at least in part, those hazy glows and mists that some observers have reported.
So it's kind of like the moon has, mini dust devils just swirling around.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy. But it's not the only explanation, of course. Some researchers think that some of these LTPs could be caused by, get this, volcanic activity.
Volcanoes on the moon. Really, I thought the moon was, like, geologically dead.
Well, for the most part, yeah. Most of the moon's volcanic activity is thought to have stopped billions of years ago, but some recent observations suggest that there might still be some residual heat deep within the lunar interior. And there's even some evidence of what appear to be, relatively recent lava flows, which suggest that volcanic activity might not be totally extinct after all.
Wow, that is mind-blowing. So the moon is even more dynamic than we thought. Okay, I want to touch on one more thing before we move on.
Mhm.
We talked before about the idea of the moon as like a spiritual repository, this idea that it could be a place where souls, go after death.
Yeah.
I gotta say, that concept just like really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more, let's say, thought-provoking theories out there. And it's not a new idea either. I mean, the moon has been a central figure in human mythology and spirituality for, well, probably as long as humans have been looking up at the sky. It's been seen as, a goddess, a realm of the dead, a source of magic and mystery.
It really does make you wonder, like, is there more to the moon than meets the eye? Could it
Mhm.
be like a bridge between the physical world and, something beyond, something spiritual?
I mean, those are questions that philosophers and mystics have grappled with for centuries, and they're not easy questions to answer, but I think it's important to keep asking them. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have the tools and the understanding to explore those realms with the same rigor that we apply to, the physical universe.
That would be amazing. Okay, so we've talked about the moon as a source of, scientific wonder, and we've explored some of the more, shall we say, far out theories about it. But let's bring it back down to Earth for a second. What about the moon's influence on us right here, right now?
Right. Well, we've already discussed how the moon creates tides and stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, which is crucial for maintaining a stable climate.
Yeah, you said that without the moon, Earth's wobble would be much more pronounced and, lead to these extreme climate swings that could make life as we know it impossible.
Exactly. The moon really acts as this, gravitational anchor that keeps our planet's spin in check. It's kind of like a built-in gyroscope that helps ensure the long-term habitability of our world.
Okay, so the moon is basically our planet's cosmic babysitter, keeping everything running smoothly. It's pretty mind-blowing to think about how this, seemingly silent, distant orb plays such a huge role in our existence.
It really is. It highlights the incredible interconnectedness of everything in the cosmos, how even seemingly small or distant things can have a profound impact on our lives.
Yeah, it definitely gives you a new perspective on the moon, that's for sure. Okay, so to recap, we've got the moon as a climate stabilizer, a source of wonder and myths, and maybe even a gateway to understanding the mysteries of consciousness in the universe. What else have we got?
Well, let's talk about eclipses. Total solar eclipses, where the moon perfectly blocks out the sun, they're a truly spectacular event that have captivated humans for, thousands of years.
Yeah, they're incredible. I've seen videos, and it's just like the sky goes dark, the temperature drops, and you can see the stars in the middle of the day. It's just amazing.
It's a beautiful illustration of that remarkable alignment between the Earth, the moon, and the sun. The fact that the moon is, just the right size and distance from Earth to create that perfect visual effect, it's pretty amazing.
I know, it almost seems too perfect to be just a coincidence,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe someone put it there on purpose.
Well, from a scientific standpoint, it really comes down to, celestial mechanics. Over billions of years, the moon's orbit has evolved to its current position, and the relative sizes and distances of the Earth, moon, and sun have created the conditions for, total solar eclipses to occur. It's all part of that grand cosmic dance.
So no divine intervention, just physics doing its thing.
That's right. But that doesn't make it any less awe-inspiring, does it?
Not at all. There's something both humbling and exhilarating about realizing, that we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves. And speaking of bigger things, let's revisit the topic of the moon slowly drifting away from Earth. We touched on this a bit earlier, but I want to dig a little deeper. What's the science behind this drifting? And, what are the implications for Earth way, way down the line?
Okay, so the moon's gradual recession from Earth is primarily due to tidal forces. As the moon orbits the Earth, its gravity creates those bulges in Earth's oceans that we call tides. And those bulges, well, they exert a tiny gravitational tug back on the moon, and that tug pulls the moon slightly forward in its orbit.
So it's like the Earth is, constantly giving the moon a little nudge, pushing it further away.
That's a great way to put it. And over time, all those little nudges add up, causing the moon's orbit to expand very slowly and causing it to move further away from Earth.
Okay, but won't this eventually lead to, like, the moon just breaking free from Earth's gravity altogether? Like, are we going to lose our moon one day?
Well, theoretically, yes, that's possible, but it's something that would take like billions and billions of years to happen.
Okay, so we've got some time. But what about the effects of this drifting, even in the, not so distant future? We talked before about how the moon stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, right? So won't that stabilization, like, weaken as the moon moves further away?
You're exactly right. Over very long timescales, as the moon continues to recede, its stabilizing influence on Earth's axial tilt will gradually decrease. And that could lead to, more pronounced wobbles in Earth's rotation, which could in turn lead to some pretty extreme and unpredictable climate shifts.
Whoa. So the moon isn't just, our cosmic babysitter keeping things running smoothly. It's also a crucial part of what makes Earth a habitable planet in the first place.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful example of how interconnected everything is in our solar system and how even these subtle changes can have really significant effects over, vast stretches of time.
It really makes you appreciate the delicate balance of our planet and the role that the moon plays in, making Earth such a welcoming home for life. It's just incredible to think about how much the moon impacts us here on Earth. I mean, everything from the tides to the stability of our climate.
It really does. It underscores that, fundamental interconnectedness of everything in our solar system.
We've explored so much in this deep dive, from the moon's formation to all those, quirky characteristics that spark so much speculation and debate.
Right. We've delved into I would say, the science behind those quirks and how researchers are, working tirelessly to understand even those most puzzling phenomena, like the lunar transient phenomena.
Yeah. And we even, ventured into some of the, let's call them more esoteric ideas about the moon, like its role in human spirituality and mythology.
It's definitely clear that the moon holds like a really special place in our collective imagination across cultures and throughout history.
Absolutely. But, beyond just sparking our imaginations, the moon also offers some really tangible opportunities for, well, humanity's future.
You're talking about like lunar exploration and the possibility of colonization.
Yeah, exactly. We touched on this earlier, but I really want to dig a little deeper. What are some of the biggest hurdles, the things we need to overcome to actually establish, a sustainable human presence on the moon?
Right. Well, creating a habitable environment on the moon, that is no small feat. We'd need to overcome some pretty major challenges, like, for instance, the lack of a breathable atmosphere.
Right.
And then you've got the extreme temperatures and the, constant bombardment of radiation from the sun and, well, from the cosmos in general.
Yeah. So it's not as simple as just, building a house and moving in, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about creating, completely self-contained environments, almost like, mini Earths.
That's a good way to think about it. We'd need to provide, well, basically everything. Breathable air, water, temperature regulation, you name it. And we'd have to come up with effective ways to shield against that radiation.
Okay. And what about, the basics, like
Uh,
food? Could we, I don't know, grow crops on the moon?
That's a great question. And it's actually an area of active research right now. Scientists are exploring the possibility of using, lunar regolith, which is that loose rocky material on the moon's surface, as a growing medium for plants.
Wow.
Yeah. They're also looking into like hydroponics and other, innovative farming techniques that could potentially be adapted to work in a lunar environment.
So we might have, like, moon farms someday. That's pretty amazing.
It's definitely possible, although, of course, there would be, significant technical challenges to overcome. Things like creating artificial sunlight and those nutrient-rich environments for plants to thrive.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, that we figure all that out. We crack the code on creating these, habitable spaces on the moon.
Mm.
Then what? What's the, like, long-term vision, the big picture for lunar colonization? Why are we doing this?
Well, the possibilities are, I would say, practically endless. The moon could become like a hub for scientific research, a platform for launching missions deeper into space, even, a potential source of those resources we've been talking about to help support a growing human population.
Right, and we've talked a bit about, mining the moon for those resources, helium-3, rare earth elements, water ice. But I have to ask, are there, like, any ethical concerns about, exploiting the moon's resources? Should we even be doing that?
That's a great question and a really important one. I think it's absolutely crucial that we approach lunar resource extraction with a really strong sense of, responsibility, sustainability. We have to ensure that any mining activities are done in a way that minimizes, environmental impact. And we have to be mindful of preserving the, scientific and cultural value of the moon.
It would be, a real shame to repeat all the mistakes we've made here on Earth, especially after all this discussion about, how special and important the moon is.
Exactly. I think it's an opportunity to do things differently, to learn from our past, and really strive for a more, sustainable and ethical future, not just on Earth, but in space as well.
I like that. So as we venture out into the cosmos, it's important to remember that we're not just, explorers, but also stewards.
That's right. We have a responsibility to protect and preserve, these celestial bodies that we're visiting.
Well, I think that's a really perfect note to end on. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the scientific wonders of the moon to, the philosophical questions that it raises.
We've explored its origins, its quirks, its influence on Earth, and of course that tantalizing prospect of its future role in human exploration.
We've looked at the evidence, weighed the theories, and, hopefully sparked some curiosity and, well, maybe even a little bit of awe in our listeners about this extraordinary, celestial body that has captivated humanity for, well, as long as we've been looking up at the sky.
What are your big takeaways from this depth dive? What questions are still swirling around in your head? We'd love to hear your thoughts, your theories, your interpretations. Share them with us.
That's what makes the deep dive so much fun, right? It's not about, having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions,
Yeah.
exploring those different perspectives, and keeping that spark of curiosity alive.
So keep looking up, keep wondering, and keep exploring that vast and mysterious universe that surrounds us all.